This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to our first edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily for 2023. Andrew Paterson and Michael Remis with you. And we've got a very busy show today. Of course, it is game night. Calgary Flames, Winnipeg Jets tonight. We'll check in on the visitors with Pat Steinberg. Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press is going to jump on with us as well. And we're going to have to talk Connor Bedard. Chris Peters is going to jump on first up and talk about that insane ending to the quarterfinal matchup with Canada being put on the broad shoulders of number 16, the consensus number one pick for the upcoming NHL draft. And some Canadian history last night, not to mention smashing Jordan Eberle and Eric Lindros's Canadian junior records at the same time. So we will get to all of that. Obviously, we will start off talking about a horrible, horrible incident last night on Monday Night Football in the middle of one of the biggest and most hyped games we've had in the NFL in a very long time. We'll do that in a second when we get Michael Remis in here. But hope you had a great New Year's. Welcome to 2023 on WST, and a big happy New Year, and thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, including the great support from our friends at Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Little Brown Jug, Canadian Club Whiskey, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, Manitoba Battery, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, and the gang down at Not Auto Corp. Let's get Michael Remis in here. Remo, happy New Year to you, my friend. How was a few days off for you?
Yes, happy New Year. It's okay. My son has this strange habit of getting sick at New Year's, and this is our third year in a row with him, so we actually had to cancel out of our plans and stay home. So it was still good. Nice to spend some time with the family. A lot of time inside, but I did get out. I got to the zoo lights January 1st. It was awesome. Pretty cool. I would recommend that for a winter activity.
Oh, by the way, first of all, shout out to Winnipeg Walter. If you missed the finale of the Marbles Tournament of Champions, it was Walter who took it down. And Walter now has Winnipeg Walter, 2022 Marble Champion in his profile in the chat. And Chris Vermette has said, Walter, I heard Walter's win was still under review for Marble PEDs. Did the results come in over the weekend? We can tell you that Walter has passed all of the tests. The marble was not juiced. And honestly, thanks to everyone that participated. That was so much fun. We'll have some more fun with marbles coming up in 2023. And a special thanks to Joe and the gang over at Consolidated Supply for making that happen. If you're lucky, maybe Walter will take you to a Bomber game next year. And Walter will get in touch in the next week or so and make arrangements for your Winnipeg Blue Bomber season tickets. We're going to spend most of the time, though, today talking hockey. Big one tonight for the Jets. Couple of interesting moves. We're going to hear from Rick Bowness in a second. But would remiss if we didn't start off with what happened last night in Monday Night Football. And Remo, listen, we're sports fans, football fans. We love the game. We love the fact that it is as competitive and hard-hitting as it is, but it is also a very dangerous game. And listen, we don't have all the details right now as far as where, exactly what happened. But I think it's safe to say that was one of the scariest scenes we've seen in professional sports in a long, long time. And Damar Hamlin is in the thoughts of everyone right now as he sits in a Cincinnati hospital in a critical condition. there were so many things about that game that was huge. The implications to the playoff races, fantasy, all that stuff, and almost in an incident, all that became completely secondary or frankly irrelevant. And I know this is an unprecedented time and a situation for the National Football League with where they are in the schedule. They have announced that there will be no resumption of the game at any point this week. The Week 18 schedule goes forward. But honestly, all that will be figured out in time. Not that the NFL has a lot of time to do it, but they'll have to figure it out in the best and fairest way to all the teams and parties. But listen, the entire sporting world, I think right now, just thinking and if you're a believer, praying that Damar Hamlin will somehow be okay. Basically, this was cardiac arrest on the field, and and I know you mentioned this. We were chatting earlier. I mean, in hockey has had a few of these instances, and 30 years ago when defibrillators weren't available or weren't mandatory at all of these rinks, we've seen this end in the most tragic way possible. And listen, this is still a tragedy. I mean, the effect, you really saw how real it was last night when you saw the looks on the players' faces, during this delay. Come back to commercial, leave, back to commercial again. I mean, I think it was pretty clear that something incredibly serious was happening because, listen, there's serious injuries that happen all the time. That is just sort of part of the game. This was on a whole nother level. And we're now in a situation where, as NFL fans, as sports fans, we're hoping for the well-being of an individual to survive this. And as I said, there's a whole bunch of other unanswered questions. We do talk about sports. We don't have any of those answers right now, other than nothing's going to be done, focusing on Damar Hamlin. And man, it was a pretty horrifying way to get into 2023 as far as what we saw last night.
Yeah, incredibly scary moment watching that game and seeing a player collapse. And you're thankful that the medical professionals were able to go in and administer CPR right away, get him in the hospital. The updates were that they put out the update like 44 minutes ago saying he spent last night in ICU, remains there in critical condition, and thankful for the outpouring of support. And that was, I think, one of the big positives that came from it. You saw everyone on Twitter and social media hammering the GoFundMe for his charity to give underprivileged kids toys for Christmas. I think it started off at the night like 10,000 on the GoFundMe. I think it's over 4 million.
Yeah,
right now. So the outpouring of care and support across the football, and just this isn't just a sports story, turned into a major news story, and you're all hoping that he is okay, Damar Hamlin, and it's a scary moment. And yeah, I did reflected on a lot as a fan of sports and the NFL, and you do remember what Jay Bowmeister collapsing a couple years ago, Yuri Fisher, I remember, and then Chris Pronger tweeted out the video of his when he took a puck to the chest and his heart stopped. So sudden impact at the right time or the wrong time or the perfect angle can put you out, and I think that's something you didn't really think of just when you're going to make a routine tackle. That's kind of almost what it looked like yesterday, and just ended so horrifically. And eventually, you saw the reaction from the players. There's no way that they would have been able to emotionally play. And then you do reflect on sometimes where the wrong decision was made. And I did see, a lot of people remembering the Owen Hart incident on Twitter yesterday, where they inexplicably continued that pay-per-view. So, horrific situation
totally.
Yesterday.
The Bills after the game tweeted out that Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest following a hit in our game versus the Bengals. His heartbeat was restored on the field, and he was transferred to the UC Medical Center for further testing and treatment. He's currently sedated and listed in critical condition. And the one thing I will say, I know there's a lot of people that are taking advantage of this to push their own narratives. There's a lot of virtue signaling. There's a lot of people that I stay away from all of that. But I will say this, the medical professionals and the first responders that went out there in that situation and worked so hard to save Damar Hamlin's life and at least get him to the hospital. Those are the people you rarely think about them. You see at games, rarely are they out there doing anything of the sort. But when everything is on the line, those people came up huge last night. And the fact that we're still talking about the possibility of him being saved and him getting great care right now and doing everything they can to save his life is something that I'll remember. And a big thanks go out to those people that were there, and the advancements that I think we as a society have had since seeing other tragedies happen, where you have the care that's available, you have things like defibrillators to hopefully avoid the worst result. So, later on today, at the end of the program, if we've gotten any more information on it as a story, what it pertains to the league, everything, I mean, we'll let you know, but figured that was pretty important to start off speaking about that. And listen, as we'll get to the Jets in just a minute, one of the bizarre things, and I think Remo will always remember this, I was so geeked for this game last night. Watched the first drive, watched the Bills come back and scored the field goal, and then I was going over to a friend's place, and we were going to go out and watch the rest of the game and grab some wings. Just went a couple blocks over to my friend's spot, walked in, and we had 5 minutes left in the junior game, and it was 3-3. By the way, ironically, after Canada was up 3-2, and the fans did the wave. So wave still undefeated, ties the game up. It went into overtime, and obviously we couldn't stop watching. And we'll get to the good part of last night, which was, of course, Connor Bedard's winning goal. But I'll always remember this. I kept on, I've got a fantasy final. There's a bunch of other things involved in this game, and I'm getting my score app up, and I keep on refreshing it, and it keeps on saying 5:58 in the first quarter. And I thought my app was broken at the time. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to have to reset my phone. And as soon as the game was over, we flipped over and immediately knew that it was an incredibly scary and serious situation. Now, for all the horror and the tragedy that was happening during the football game, it was the exact opposite in Halifax, and the legend of Connor Bedard continues to grow. Broke the records last night, but he didn't just break the records. He put a country on his back, avoiding what would have been a horrible loss to the Slovakians in the quarterfinal of an event that Canada is hosting. And he did it with one of the most legendary goals, certainly in Canadian junior history, going through the entire team at 3-on-3 after 5 incredible shots in overtime. And that Slovakian goalie was just phenomenal. I've run out of superlatives for Connor Bedard. All I know is that we're watching a superstar in the making, and we'll remember this sort of performance when he is one of, if not the star for the next generation of the NHL.
Yeah, that junior game was an absolutely incredible drama. The setting in Halifax, the fans going crazy at home, and you love seeing it there. Tie game, overtime, and you're just thinking, don't go to a shootout, because nobody wants that. And it seemed like Bedard was on the ice basically the entire overtime. And every time he gets a puck, you think something is going to happen. They were all over him. I know the Slovak goalie made some saves. The Canadian goalie made some saves, but that one shift at the end that ended it. I mean, he had a couple chances right before, was skating all around, and then he dangles. One guy cuts the middle, dangles another guy one-on-one with the goalie, dangles the goalie. An absolutely incredible move, and it's just such a contrast between what was going on in the NFL and the Canada game, and it just made for such a one of the nights in sports you'll probably always remember last night. But that goal, I mean, and also passing, the historic nature of the goal, passing Eberle, Lindros, the names that he's passing for all-time goals in a tournament and points. I mean, completely so historic. And I see people in chat saying, "Hey, if you're not going to be in the playoffs, just try to lose as many games to give you're not going to guaranteed Bedard, but you need to get as good of a chance as you can, because this guy is a franchise-changing player."
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking, throughout the tournament about Bedard and how, I mean, listen, this guy, we've known about him for years, and it's all been coming up to this draft. And we've seen teams that have already been tanking, obviously, at the beginning of the season. I think this tanking is going to go to a whole nother level. based on what we've seen right now. I mean, if anyone had any doubts, what I'm interested in, regardless of where he goes, how many goals does he score next year? I saw Grant McKegg speculate that he's probably good for 40 next year in the NHL, playing on the wing. And I'll be honest, I think I'd ride with that right now. His shot right now would be a top 10 shot in the National Hockey League. And maybe I'm not even doing him the service of it. So anyways, Connor Bedard, we're going to talk about it coming up with Chris Peters in just a few minutes.
I pulled up the lot. Yeah, I pulled the lottery simulator real quick, and like Chicago right now has the best odds at getting him at 18.5%. Anaheim has the second best odds, 13.5. I mean that 5% difference. That's a lot of percent difference. So I think do what you got to do. Who cares? Even if it's a 1% difference between 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, I think you all saw the game. Any additional chance you can give yourself, you have to try to do, even if it's how minor it may seem.
Well, the thing about it is, what's the word? What right now? I mean, the draft rules have changed. The worst you can do is fall back 3 spots.
I think so. And hey, shout out to Montreal Huss, who actually might have the second best odds because they have Florida's pick as well. So Montreal actually might have the best. They might have the second best. As of now, they would have the second best odds. Or tied for second best.
When you add Florida's position and percentage chance with Montreal's,
they would have the second best chance to get him, Montreal. But if you add Florida's chance. Well, and we'll leave it there.
Don't even get me going on Florida. Where
another time
goes. But the Panthers are 7th right now in the Atlantic Division and 8 points out of a playoff spot. They need to figure it out very soon. But let's get to the Jets. And we'll talk to Steinberg about the visiting Calgary Flames a little bit later on. But even before we get to the Flames game, Remo, I mean, how about the way 2022 ended for the Winnipeg Jets, going into Edmonton and gutting out a 2-1 win in regulation? Connor Hellebuck, brilliant, 31 of 32 saves. The Pionky Tonk man getting in on it. Kyle Connor with the winning goal. And maybe most impressive, an all-out penalty kill display in the final 2+ minutes as the Jets held on to that 1-goal lead, led by Hellebuck, but some huge block shots. Dylan Sandberg in the mix as well. And man, just a big 2 points for the Winnipeg Jets. And we start 2023 with the Jets 10 games above 500 right now in the Central Division.
Yeah, the Jets caught a bit of a break here with Leon Draisaitl out with injury. And Edmonton had played the night before as well. And we talked about, would that be a factor? And I think Edmonton and Connor McDavid, they used up all their goals on the Friday night. I think he had, a 5-point night, absolutely pasting the Kraken. And the Jets were able to lock it down 2-1. They got outshot a bit, but we know the situation they're in terms of the personnel that they have. And they played the way that they needed to play. And Hellebuck stepped up, stopping, 31 of 32. You got some nice offensive moves from Kyle Connor, setting up Pionk on the first one and tipping a Pionk shot on the second one. And look, it was a gritty win. You don't want them all to be like that, but we know the Jets' situation, and they needed that 2 points very badly. They got a tough test tonight, and they're happy to bank 2. A great way to start the new year, Hustler. I don't know what you were doing Saturday night, but I was home fist bumping that one. You're kind of just watching the clock go as they're trying to block shot after shot at the end. And yeah, Dylan Sandberg with the big block. Everyone was putting their body on the line, and that was a gutsy win. Well done there on New Year's, because it would have been just a crappy New Year's if you had a loss there.
Hey, listen, I mean, some of us aren't very well-rounded, don't have a lot of other things going on, and you're damn right I was locked in on that game, and my New Year's Eve was going to be made or broken by what happened in the Jets-Oilers. Listen, I'll own it. And I'll tell you what, once they won, there was a few extra cheers, a few extra whoops where I was at. And, listen, good times. Listen, the Jets do. I mean, and this is one of the things that now as we're getting to the midway point of the regular season, be continuing to pay close attention to. It's hard to get too crazy about playoff spots and whatnot, 20, 25 games in. But But as I said, we're 4 games away from the midway point of the season, and the Winnipeg Jets are 47 points in 37 games, second place in the Central Division. Game in hand, but 5 points back of the Dallas Stars. And I will say comfortably in not just a playoff spot, but one of the top 3 spots in the Central Division. So we'll see what they can do starting off 2023 tonight against the Calgary Flames. And Remo, I guess the big news just before we get, and we should be hearing some clarity on Jansen Harkins relatively soon.
He cleared.
Okay, he did clear. So Jansen Harkins was put on waivers yesterday and just hot off the press has cleared waivers. So he'll go to the Manitoba Moose. That's great for the organization to not lose Harkins. I'll be honest, considering the way he was playing, the fact that Esimont was out a few times, I was sort of surprised that he was the guy that was first up on the waiver block, Reem, but that's exactly what happened yesterday. And that means that many of these injured players are just about ready to go. But as we'll hear from Rick Bowness a little later on, it looks like we'll have the same lineup tonight, and Rick's going to give Nikolai Ehlers, Nate Schmidt, Cole Perfetti an extra couple days of practice before getting back into the lineup, presumably against the Tampa Bay Lightning on Friday.
Yeah, they all, but they started skating yesterday. You saw Ehlers, Perfetti, Schmidt, and was a light blue jerseys, and Menelainen and Wheeler in the red non-contact. But yes, those guys, sounds like some of them, we are not sure who will be able to play Friday, and Wheeler and Menelainen a bit further down the road. But bodies are becoming healthier, and that's a positive sign for the Jets. But first up, Calgary, who's playing a lot better as of late here tonight. And I know Pat will give us the big lowdown on the Flames later on in the show.
Excellent. All right, we'll hear from Rick Bowness. Jeff Hamilton's going to join us, Pat Steinberg as well. But we're going to get to a little World Junior talk. And I mean, Connor Bedard, oh my God. Just before we do that, I got to give a huge thanks to the gang at Consolidated Supply. The entire month of December was dominated by the Marbles Tournament of Champions, and it was even a greater hit than we could have imagined. Shout out to everyone that joined us. And we may have some expanded Marbles programming in the future, but you can guarantee Friday afternoons here on WST. It's happening. But now we're into 2023. Look ahead. Start thinking about the snow clearing and getting ready for a beautiful summer here in Manitoba. Maybe you're thinking about a new landscape project, putting that dream putting green in the backyard, an outdoor kitchen, a hot tub, maybe getting that personalized golf cart for the campground. Consolidated Supply has it all. Pop down and see Joe and the gang, 1395 Niagara Road East, or online at their new website at cte.ca. Got some great entries for the Wallace & Wallace Unsung Hero program in December. And now it's time, as we get into January, to do it all over again. If you've been waiting to send us a nomination for that unsung hero in your community, do it now. Send us an email, unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. Want to hear about the people that are doing extra hours helping out our community, whether it be charity, helping the needy, or just doing acts of kindness for neighbors and more. Send us there. Our winner will receive an autographed Josh Morrissey jersey, and Wallace & Wallace will make a $500 donation to the Dream Factory, and it will be matched by Josh and Margot Morrissey himself. Unsung Hero at winnipegsportstalk.com. And hey, with the new year here, everyone wants to be a little healthier in 2023. Start off at Vita Health Fresh Market with great prices on natural organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries. When you shop at Vita Health, you're supporting a great local company, family-owned and operated since 1936, with Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too. And hey, if you can't make it down to any of the 7 Vita Health stores, visit their website to buy online, schedule a delivery, or in-store pickup. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives, 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge. And check them out online at myvita.ca. All right, let's talk Connor Bedard, World Juniors, before we get back to tonight's Jets Flames tilt, and welcome in Chris Peters, the senior content creator at Flow Hockey. Chris, welcome back to the show. How are you? How was the drive out to Halley?
It was scenic, no moose, thankfully. That's always my goal, is to not hit a moose when I drive in Canada. But yeah, it was great. Great to be in Moncton for the last couple of weeks, and now I'm really excited to be in Halifax for the rest of the tournament here. It's been a memorable one, no question about it. It's been a lot of fun to be here at all.
I mean, you know where we got to start off right off the bat. The Connor
I
Bedard
don't
show.
know.
Yeah. The Connor Bedard show. I mean, we'll get into the historic nature of what he's done, but let's just specifically talk about last night and how he literally put that team on his back, the amount of opportunities that he had, the brilliance of the Slovakian goaltender to keep them in it, and then a goal that I don't think anyone that watched it will ever forget to put Canada into the semis.
Yeah, I mean, a signature moment in a career that seems like it's been full of them, and he's not even 18 yet. It's just remarkable what Connor Bedard has done. And before the game, I was thinking about the fact that Canada is the deeper team. They've got more talent, more first round draft picks, more everything. Even some guys that have played in the NHL this year. But I thought the more I thought about it, I said the biggest reason that Canada is favored to win this game isn't because of their depth, isn't because of how good they are. It's because they have Connor Bedard and Slovakia doesn't. And that's going to be the same thing the rest of the way. They have Connor Bedard and nobody else does. And really, that was a player that decided on his own, I'm going to take this over. I'm going to, he played pretty much every other shift in overtime. He was out there for a number of chances. I think Canada ended up generating 8 shots on goal in the overtime period, and that includes with a power play. And he just stuck with it. And I think when it was time to end the game, he just decided to do it. And that was the most remarkable thing about it. And Connor is not a guy that is typically going to score goals by dangling through everybody. He's usually going to blow it by you. And this time he's like, you know what, we're not getting enough push here. We're not getting our shots from the outside against Adam Guyon, who had made 50 plus saves in that game. So he just goes ahead and takes it right to the net, goes around 3 guys, and scores one of the signature goals of this tournament. So just a remarkable moment, and for him, just another great opportunity for him to showcase exactly how special he is. And I think we've learned that he is everything we thought he was, and probably a little bit more.
Chris, as someone that's followed the game for a long time and has always loved the draft, sometimes I get a little. I mean, you want to pump the brakes on hype on players because we've seen guys that we've heard all about that are going to be amazing that don't turn out to be incredible pros. But then there are players like Bedard come along that I think the term generational player has been greatly overused recently, but this is that guy. And man, he's rewriting the history books as well. I mean, when you consider some of the performances and the players, both for Canada and in this tournament, that he is taking a run at or passing, I think it just speaks to every single bit of hype has been warranted for Connor Bedard.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, you look at the totals that he's put together, the fact that he has all these points. I mean, really, to have 21 points in a single tournament, to have 34 career points, to be the all-time leading scorer for Canada, and now just 1 point away from entering the top 5 all-time of this tournament. And you've got the guys that he'll catch are Esa Tikkanen and Alexander Mogilny with 35 points. We assume that Connor is going to get at least another one over these next 2 games, because whether they win or lose against the US, he's going to have 2 cracks to get there. And I don't know if he'll catch Pavel Bure, who's at 39 career points at number 3 all time, but still, it's just amazing to see what he's been able to accomplish. And the thing is they did have games against Germany and Austria that certainly will pad the stats, but again, he's one of very few players that got 7 points in a game, one of very few players that had 13 points over 2 games. So really he continues to defy any thought of what is possible in this tournament. I mean, we're talking about the 80s and 90s where things were far different. And you look at the goaltending performance that Adam Guyon put in for Slovakia, and the fact that Connor Bedard was able to get 2 past him in a game that he played that well, just goes to show how special he is. So all the historical numbers, everything else we've seen, is just a continuation of what Connor Bedard has been doing from the very beginning. I mean, you look at his numbers from last year and this year with Regina. We're talking about one of the great junior hockey players of all time. I mean, really, especially when you consider the era that he's playing in. So, it's been interesting to see, because I think his NHL projection is different necessarily than, a Connor McDavid, let's say, where, he doesn't have the size or skating ability. And that's going to be something that I think will ultimately be thought about, but it's not going to change the fact that he's the number one prospect in this draft. And it's certainly not going to change the fact that I think he is a generational goal scorer at the very least, and, potentially a generational player overall. There are definitely some teams out there that wonder if, at 5'9" and 5'10" or so, and on a little bit of the lighter side, will he be able to be a center full time in the NHL level? But they do know that no matter what, they want the puck on his stick. They want him to drive play, which he can do, and he can score. So just a remarkable all around player, and a big reason why, if you are in trouble this season, just lean into it, because he's that special. And you have a guy like that on your team, you feel like you've got your rebuild pretty much on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of jokes that have been made about the tank jobs that some teams are doing right now. It's going to get downright nuclear in the second half of this season based on what we've seen so far. And when you look at Bedard, and I guess like everything, it's an inexact science. He's going to be in the NHL next year as an 18-year-old. I've heard from some people that he projects maybe better, at least to start his NHL career as a winger, where he can really focus more on the offense, not have the big defensive responsibilities that a center has. And even that right now might be able to put up in the neighborhood of 40 next year. I mean, do you have those high expectations? Or, I mean, as I said, I've been saying pump the brakes for a long time, and now I'm basically doing a complete 180 and going, this guy, there's nothing he can't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure he's going to have to start on the wing. He's played wing here. He's playing wing at the World Juniors with Logan Stankoven being the center, and then they had Shane Wright at center before. And I think that that's largely because they said, hey, let's open you up for all these offensive opportunities. I think that his ability, his hockey sense is just so high end. His ability to find the quiet spaces in the ice, the fact that he will take the puck, and that he doesn't make a lot of bad decisions with the puck. It's just basically he's so sure-handed with it, and he just has such an understanding of how to play, and the game slows down for him. And that's the other thing, is he thinks the game at such an incredible level that things are happening at a slower pace, even though at the World Juniors it's about as close as you can get to the NHL pace outside of the NHL. So it's remarkable for me to see this kid just continue to defy the expectations that were already so high. And I'd say, I think you look at the last couple of years, and some of the guys that have come into the NHL, they've had a little bit of a tougher time. Jack Hughes had a bit of a slow start. Alexi Lafreniere still trying to get it together now. And we saw Owen Power actually go back to college last year. I think Connor Bedard is in a bit of a different class than any of those players at this point. I think the way that he's played right now, and the way that he thinks the game, he's going to be able to go into an NHL team and potentially be a top six forward immediately. There are things that he's going to have to improve. He's going to have to improve on his physical strength. The competitiveness is not an issue. The shift to shift, work ethic is not an issue with him. But just getting physically stronger, not getting frustrated when things don't go your way, because he's never really faced that at any point in his career. At the NHL, there will be moments of adversity that he's going to have to fight through, which we just haven't seen him had to deal with a ton in his young career. But I do think that he's a guy that should be there immediately, and should be in a pretty substantial role. And if you put him with the right players, he's going to make them better, and they're going to make him better. So I think there's a lot of high expectations, and he's one guy where I feel like, he thinks the game at such a high level, just take the brakes off at this point and just let it all happen.
Chris, it was listen, Bedard's completely taken over this tournament and all conversations around it, but there was a lot of talk about Adam Fantilli coming in, and I'll be honest, from what I've seen of Fantilli, I see the package that he is and why teams would be salivating over him as well. What have you thought about him in the tournament so far? And when we look at the draft, once Bedard goes off the board, do you think he's number two?
I do think he's number two. He's played a little bit below his standard at this tournament, I feel like. And I think part of that is role related. He had a good opportunity, but it didn't, he didn't necessarily live up to that, and started kind of moving down the lineup and not getting the minutes and things like that. But, I think that he's one of those guys where you can never really give him a fair shake because he was playing with the best player in the world in the draft. But there was a period of time at this season, especially earlier in the year, when Adam Fantilli was absolutely torching the NCAA. It's like, hey, he could potentially challenge Bedard. I don't think that we're going to hear those discussions much anymore. But what we will hear is, that competition for number 2. And Leo Carlsson, who's also here, is another guy that's in the mix for that. He scored 2 big goals for Sweden yesterday. So he's a big bodied forward. The difference is that Adam Fantilli is such a tremendous skater. He's got good physical strength. He's got scoring ability. You look at the entire body of work that he's put together over the last several years, including as a rookie in the USHL at 16 years old, where he was the MVP of the championship series there in that league, which is just remarkable at that age. I think that there's a lot of teams that are still very excited about him, regardless of how he performs here at the World Juniors. He's moved down the lineup. He's not going to have as much of an opportunity to impact the games, but when he has been out there, you can definitely see the skills, you see the speed, you see the work ethic, all those different things that will make him a very high draft pick. And a reason why, if you are tanking, you're not, okay, well, we don't get Bedard, but we can get a really solid number 2 here, where, similarly to how the Sabres felt, they missed out on Connor McDavid, but then got Jack Eichel, who, if we're revising history, maybe it didn't work out the way that anybody hoped it would in Buffalo, but still that was an exceptional player that they managed to get. And now, they'll reap the benefits of that trade down the line as well. But yeah, I mean, I think Fantilli has done enough to show that, yeah, he's still among the very best in this draft class. And I think his entire body of work, speaks for itself.
Talking World Juniors with Chris Peters of Flo Hockey, which brings us to tomorrow, the semis. And we got Canada versus the USA. Always a great rivalry matchup, especially at the World Juniors. Got to ask you about the Jets prospect, Chaz Lucius and Rutger McGroarty. What have you seen from them? And fill us in on sort of the tale of the tape between these two teams for the big game tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, about the Jets prospects first, I think, Rutger McGroarty and Chaz Lucius, they played a lot together in the tournament. They've been on USA's kind of de facto second line. That line has kind of gone in and out. They've been okay at times. They've had some good moments. McGroarty is also on the first power play unit. Lucius is on the second power play unit. Both of them in the bumper position, oddly enough. But they're both really good in the power play situations. I think that they've had real good moments of the tournament. I haven't necessarily seen an amazing game from either one of them. But I think, with Rutger McGroarty and Chaz Lucius, you're expecting goals, and they've been able to score. They've had some good moments, and they've looked good on the power play. As for the game as a whole, I'm fascinated by this entire process. Slovakia played a really strong game against Canada. They might not have had the puck a lot, but I think that they put enough pressure on. And I think if you're Canada, you have to be a little bit concerned that it did take Connor Bedard taking over a game where, you basically you had a 2-goal lead and you squandered it, and you weren't able to kind of figure that out. Was it because you faced off against a good goaltender, or was it because there might be some other issues there? And then obviously you've had the loss against the Czech Republic. So now you know that you're a team that is beatable. You were even beatable by a Slovakian team that didn't necessarily match up with the depth that you had. So that's the one concern I'd have if I'm Canada. But again, you've got Connor Bedard. He's the kind of break glass in case of emergency situation there. And he's always going to be that option where, I don't think the U.S. can put anybody on him and successfully, slow him down. But they're going to try. And I think that the interesting thing about the U.S. is they play very fast. They have a smaller D core that's more puck moving based. So the U.S. is going to try very hard to establish possession throughout that game and just to have the puck a lot more than Canada. That's going to be their best defense because they don't really have a true shutdown defender. They don't necessarily have a true shutdown line. I think Connor Bedard's probably going to see a lot of Red Savage in that game. And he's been down the lineup for the U.S., but he's speedy, he's gritty. I'm sure he's probably going to be on Bedard an awful lot. But then you've also got a really good top line for the U.S. that you have to be aware of, and that's Logan Cooley, Cutter Gauthier, Jimmy Snuggerud, 3 first-round draft picks. They've been excellent in this tournament. Cooley had a hat trick against Germany. Gauthier had a couple of goals. Snuggerud's got goals. They're really, really good. So you got to find a way to slow them down as well. And if you do slow them down, then you have a better chance against the U.S. because they don't necessarily have the scoring depth that Canada does. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. And then lastly, the goaltender for Team USA, 17-year-old Trey Augustine. So you've got an underage goaltender playing in the biggest game of his life to date. Probably never have played in an environment like the one he's about to go into in Halifax. So that's a whole other wild card thing. He's been excellent in this tournament for the U.S., a .938 save percentage so far for him. He's been the difference maker in a position that a lot of us thought would be a trouble position for them. But I think when it comes down to it, it's just going to be a battle of these two teams, and I think they're fairly evenly matched. I think Canada's a little bit deeper. I like their blue line a little bit better, but I think USA's blue line has actually played better in this tournament than Canada's has to date. So going to be a fascinating game, two very different style teams. I think Canada's going to try to be physical and establish that early, and we'll have to see how USA handles that, because if they can't handle the Canadian forecheck, they're going to be in big trouble. If they do, then that puts a little bit more pressure on Canada. So I think it's going to be a great matchup. I cannot wait for it. Obviously, we all hope for a USA-Canada game whenever these two teams get together. I'm super excited about it. I'm sure everybody across Canada is as well.
Chris, will the winner of the Canada-USA game, should the winner, I guess, in your opinion, be a pretty big favorite against either the Swedes or the Czechs? Or is this a very wide open tournament right now with 4 teams that could all win it?
I feel it's a pretty wide open tournament. I have less faith in Sweden. They needed a late goal, shorthanded goal. They kind of got away with one, I feel like, against Finland yesterday. But I think that Czech team is legit. I think that they have such a tremendous blue line. They are an absolute threat to win the gold medal against any of these teams. I think that Sweden has a little bit less on the back end, which is why I have concerns about their overall ability to compete with some of these teams. We saw how badly they got dominated by Canada. I think USA would give them similar trouble. But I do think that you've got, any one of those teams can have a big game. They've got the goaltending to get it done. They've got the scoring to get it done. So I do feel it's pretty wide open. I would not say that either one of Canada or the U.S. is a heavy favorite, especially if it's Czechia on the other side, just because they have been so good in this tournament. And I mean, that Swiss team that they just steamrolled yesterday was a really good team throughout the tournament. They beat Finland. They won 3 of their preliminary round games and in overtime. So that was not an easy win. I think this Czech team is to be taken very, very seriously across as we get to this stage of the tournament. But I cannot wait. I think we've got 2 great semifinals. It's setting up for a great medal, a couple days on the medal game days as well. So I've been blown away by this World Juniors. I thought the summer one was just an absolute slog until the final game, and this one is such a great reward. A normal World Juniors, great atmosphere, great games, surprising results. It's been a phenomenal tournament, top to bottom.
Well, you know what? And just on that note, I did want to ask you, and of course, you've been out in Moncton and now heading into Halifax, but I mean, for obvious reasons, everything that's happened with Hockey Canada over the past year plus, I think there were major questions as to what this tournament was going to be like. What was the atmosphere going to be? What would the support be? Certainly seems like it's sort of back to normal. I mean, what's your experience been just being a part of it, and the way the Maritimers have stepped up to get behind the team and the tournament?
Yeah, I was in Moncton, but you would have felt like Canada was playing in those games just because of how many people were there. I mean, they didn't sell out every single game, but there were most tickets sold for most games. The game against USA, the Finland-USA game, was a decisively partisan Finnish crowd. It felt like a road game for the Americans. It was a phenomenal environment for them to play in. And I think it's interesting. You bring the tournament back to a couple of junior cities, which I think, basically you're taking away the capacity of those NHL buildings. You're putting it in a place where they not only value the tournament, but they also want to show the rest of the world how much they value it. And I think that in this Hockey Canada situation that continues, that's ongoing, and that there's still an investigation ongoing even in Halifax for the 2003 World Juniors. I think that there is a separation of Canada from Hockey Canada in this kind of situation. And a lot of these family traditions that are built around the World Juniors and the different things like that, those are the things that matter more to people. I don't think that means that you forget what's happened and what is continuing to happen as Hockey Canada kind of continues to deal with this reckoning, and also that there are still investigations ongoing. We can't forget those things. But I do think that there are people that have compartmentalized it to a certain extent. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do think that, for the players that are participating, for the people that are going to the games, they are creating an experience that is separate from that. And I think that that's okay. You know, I think that is, you know, these people are celebrating the game of hockey, and hopefully not forgetting, but also separating the two at this point. But we'll continue to have these conversations and discussions. But I do think that, you know, it's been a remarkable environment to cover a tournament in, and certainly for the fans, I think that they've really enjoyed it. And there's no doubt about it that the players, this has meant a lot to them too, because many of them have never played in an environment like this.
Chris Peters is with us. Chris, we always love having you on the program and can't thank you enough for jumping on today. By the way, I like that Flo hockey hat you've got going on. Fill us in quickly. Give us a little plug for your new home and what you guys have cooking on over there.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I've been at Flo Hockey since June. You know, it's part of the Flo Sports network, and we've got a bunch of different sports streaming on there, and also a lot of game streaming, ECHL, USHL, some college hockey conferences as well. And I've been running the hockey content there since June, and we're doing a ton of prospect coverage. I've done, you know, as much World Junior coverage as I possibly can handle on my own, which has been a blast for me to do. We've had more of a USA focus since we're a US-based publication, but certainly tracking Connor Bedard very, very closely. And we'll still have a lot more coming up there. And also on my podcast, Talking Hockey Sense, which is on the Flo Sports Podcast Network now. So it's been a great experience so far. We're trying to grow within the hockey community. We're trying to provide, you know, some great prospect coverage and college hockey coverage and junior hockey coverage and minor league hockey as well. So, you know, we're trying to cover as many bases beneath the NHL as we can, and make sure that those sports are getting the due that they deserve, or those leagues rather get the due that they deserve, and certainly going all in on the World Junior. So it's been a blast to be a part of it. You know, I really appreciate you know, coming on programs like these and letting people know about it, because I think that I'm hoping that, you know, it's a big tent in this hockey world, and I hope that we can, you know, provide another outlet for people to enjoy and learn about the sport that they really care about. So it's been great for me, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Well, hey, once you get home, you might have to fire up the wagon and head north on I-29, come up to the Peg, see Zach Benson in the ice, and we'll have a couple cold little brown jugs waiting for you.
That sounds good to me. Sign me up for that.
Chris, thanks for doing this. Enjoy the rest of the tourney. We'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks, Hustler. See ya.
There's Chris Peters. Give him a follow on Twitter at Chris M. Peters. And Flo Hockey is at FLO Hockey. Make sure to check them out as well. All right. We're going to hear from Rick Bowness in just a second before we get into all Jets topics with Jeff Hamilton. But of course, a big happy new year to our friends at Manitoba Battery. Pretty nice outside right now. But folks, it's the beginning of January. We know what's coming. A few hard weeks at some point. And it's not just hard weeks for our mental state, but also for your car. And if your battery is sketchy right now, this is not the city to be having a touch and go battery. What you need to do is, if you want to get the thing tested, pop on down to Manitoba Battery at 1026 Logan Avenue. Donnie and the gang will give you a quick test, let you know where your battery is at. And if you don't need one, you're good to go. If you do need one, you'll save time and save money with the best prices in town, shopping local on batteries of all shapes and sizes, but especially car batteries right now. And hey, if your car is dead, if you know you need a new battery, don't even get off your seat. Give them a phone call or order online at manitobabattery.com, and they will deliver it to you same day anywhere in the city. Only one place in town. You can shop local, save time, and save money, and that is Manitoba Battery, 1026 Logan Avenue, and again, online at manitobabattery.com. A big happy new year to the gang over at Royal Sports for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Massive Boxing Day deals finishing up on the weekend. But as we get into the new year, make sure you're following Royal Sports Pembina on Instagram for all their latest merchandise drops and sale information. And hey, if you kind of finished the holiday season and now looking to maybe do a little shopping for yourself, you know, Royal Sports, biggest hockey selection in the city. I believe they still do have a ton of sticks on sale right now, and all sorts of great merchandise for your favorites, both your favorite teams here locally, NHL, Bombers, Jets, and of course, World Soccer as well. Royal Sports, the sports superstore, 750 Pembina Highway. And now as we get into the new year, guys, I know many of you are planning for maybe a wedding or being involved in one, or for, of course, a graduation, and F Apparel, the spot for custom suits at a great price in Winnipeg, has great specials on both wedding and wedding parties and grads coming up. So make sure to pop down, see Andrew and the gang at F Apparel. You can also make an appointment online or check them out at fepapparel.com. Excuse me. All right, let's get Remis in here. Jeff Hamilton's going to come up right away. Remo, can we bang out a few of these Bones clips? I figured it'd be a good way to get into Jeff.
Yeah, if you want to talk about injuries or whatever else you want to get to, Hustler, I know. So I gotta get
let's do the injury update, and we'll just do the first 3 clips, and then we'll talk about it with Jeff Hamilton, who's going to join us in just a minute.
Sure. He was asked, so we talked about who was skating, Hustler. Was what? Perfetti, Schmidt, Ehlers, and not non-contact jerseys, but they were in a unique color. And it was also here, sorry, Hustler.
Wheeler and
Wheeler and Metalainen in there in the red non-contact. So here's what he said about them.
Now, if this was a playoff game, the 3 guys that weren't in red probably would play, but they've only had 1 practice with us yesterday. This gives us a couple extra days, and it gives us an extra practice on Thursday. So we're hoping to have a few of them in the lineup for Thursday or for Friday night.
All right, so that was just a quick update from Bones, and let's just get number 2 as well. Bones was asked if there's a downside to so many guys coming back all at once.
Listen, the guys that are coming back some of them have missed a significant amount of time. So to sit here and think they're going to step right in and be in game speed, that's not going to happen. It's not. They're going to need some time. It's like coming out of training camp. There's a big difference between training camp and the regular season. The guys that have missed significant time, we're going to have to be very patient with them and monitor their ice time and everything else. The guys that have missed a couple weeks, that's a different discussion. But some of these guys that are coming back have missed a significant amount of time. So we will have to monitor who they're up against, their ice time and everything else. That's something we're going to have to watch very closely, but that doesn't mean they're just going to step in and pick up where they left off. That's just not going to happen.
All right, and let's get one more. Remo, if you can get number 6 ready. One of the things that we'll be talking about with Jeff was the decision to send Jansen Harkins down, and obviously what this means for the rest of the guys that have stepped up and increased roles, some from the Manitoba Moose, with all the players injured, with guys coming back right now. But here's Bones on the decision by the Jets to send Jansen Harkins down, who did clear waivers earlier today.
Well, those are always tough calls. We needed him to just be a little bit more reliable defensively along the boards and things like that. That's kind of what that's basically what the decision was based on. I had a good talk with him yesterday about those things, and it's disappointing for him. But we've got to make room for some guys, and there's going to be more guys. If once these guys come back, there's only 23-man roster. There's going to be more guys that we're going to have to make very, very tough decisions on, and that was a tough decision.
Does it come down at times just to defined roles? Reichel plays the right wing, or Stenlund, you want him on face-offs, Axel Johnson, Bjorby, forecheck, penalty kill.
Well, it does. Is your ability on your fourth line to get the puck out of the zone and make plays when they're there, for sure. But if there's nothing there, make the right decision at the right time. Christian did that for us at the last game. We got to find out if he continue to do it. The only way to do it is let him keep playing. And again, there's roster decisions we have to make, and those are tough decisions. And Harks is a very, very tough, very popular in the room. He's a hard-working guy. He's been committed to the team. Those aren't easy decisions, but they have to be made.
All right, there is Rick Bowness, and let's talk some more Jets heading into 2023 in tonight's game against the Calgary Flames with our pal Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press, one of our first guests of the new year. Happy New Year. How was a couple days off for you?
Very exciting to be one of your first guests in 2023. You know what? It's funny. We talked, I guess just over a week ago on Monday, and I was telling you about how I felt like I was on the other end of being sick. Well, I'm not read up on it or whatever, but I guess a lot of people have been getting it and then getting a couple of days of feeling better and then falling off a cliff. Well, yeah, I think about 45 minutes after I checked out of that interview, I fell off a cliff. And so for the first 10 days of my 21-day vacation, I've been bedridden for about 90% of it. So not a great start, but I am on the outside. I feel like I'm doing much better now, and certainly pain or cold medication has helped. Anyone who's been to a pharmacy knows how the shelves have pretty much been cleared. But it feels good to be on the show. It feels good to be able to chat and talk after what's been a somewhat miserable couple of weeks here.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I've been in the similar boat as you, and I apologies to people that have seen the odd coughing fit on this program, but it is what it is right now. We power through. Very similar to what the Winnipeg Jets did through the month of December, to be honest, Jeff. I mean, this team had everything thrown at it, whether the schedule, the travel, tons of significant injuries, and finished things off with a big win at home on Thursday night against the Vancouver Canucks, and then went into Edmonton and got it done in regulation. Connor Hellebuck, brilliant. The PK stepping up late in the third when they really needed it and getting another two big points. And yeah, to think we're starting off January with this team in second place in the Central, 10 games above 500. Joke that Rick Bowness got the WST Person of the Year award on Friday's show as the guy that has made the biggest impact. But he really has. And now the Jets are in a situation where there's going to be some tough decisions for guys that have played so well, that have really helped them keep their heads above water while the likes of Ehlers and Wheeler and Nate Schmidt have been out as they come back later on this week.
Well, yeah. And then, Saki Menelainen, Mason Appleton. I mean, these guys are eventually going to make their way back into the lineup. And so to see a guy like Jansen Harkins be put back on waivers, certainly, as Rick mentioned, disappointing for him to get that news. Especially after what he had done earlier in the season, being sent down and improving his consistency in his game with the Moose, being a little bit of a scoring threat with Manitoba, and then coming back up and seeing that play, seeing that play with the Moose transpire over with the Jets. But that didn't last long enough. And I'm not saying that Jansen Harkins was bad after a few games with the Jets, but he wasn't as consistent. And made room for other players who were in the lineup that had been more consistent. So if you feel like that one's a bit of a tough blow, and I'm not sure many do, but if you do think that, I mean, there's going to be more guys sent back. I mean, this is, as Rick mentioned, I mean, this is a 23-man roster. So with a handful of guys expected to return to the lineup soon, it's just simple math. Guys are going to have to go the other way. So the good news is the Jets have continued to push in the standings, continue to maintain their spot, even going through that 3-game losing streak earlier, or last month. I mean, that was their bit of adversity, and the fact that they've been able to answer back to go into Edmonton against a tough Oilers team and earn a regulation win, that was impressive. So, but that's really a microcosm of what we've seen from this team all season long. When they face tough challenges, adversity, they manage to come out of it. Not just alive, but thriving. So good on the Jets for what they've been able to do here over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And, I'm just looking at these lines right now, and obviously things are going to look a lot different Friday. I imagine Adam Lowry will be back to playing center. I don't think, though, that the importance of Kevin Stenlund is going to be diminished going into it. I mean, Gustafsson and Stenlund are playing center right now, Jeff. But I mean, the one thing that we saw very quickly when Stenlund got called up was Gus move over to the wing. Do you think Kevin Stenlund sticks around and is in the 12 even when guys get healthy and get back, or is there just not enough room?
It's hard to say. And I mean, I don't have the answer to that question. I don't make those final roster decisions, but I will say this: the Jets aren't good at faceoffs. And Kevin Stenlund came in, and
they're very important to Rick Bowness.
And they're very important to Rick Bowness, a guy who loves possession numbers. So, is that enough for Kevin Stenlund to stick around and to be in that top 12, to be a everyday player in the on forward for the Jets? I'm not 100% sure, but when you look at not just around the league, but specifically on this team, not a lot of good face-off men. A lot of guys under 50%. Kevin Stenlund, I believe, is a bit over that. I mean, I think he was a full 10 points maybe above Mark Scheifele at one point. Again, smaller sample size, but still enough to suggest he's a good face-off guy. So I think, for him, he's going to have to bring that consistency every night, like every player in the lineup, whether you're in the top line or bottom. But certainly with his skill set, that's why he got into it. That's why Kevin Stenlund replaced David Gustafsson at center. That's why you probably look at those two players earlier in the season, and David Gustafsson would have been ahead of him. Well, I think those faceoffs success that Kevin Stenlund has had alone has moved him above David Gustafsson in Rick Bowness's his own mental depth chart, if you will. So I think overall, he's going to have to continue to do what he's doing. He brings size. He has been able to score goals too in the brief time he's been with the Jets. So to say he's going to be there when everyone comes back, it's hard to say, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he is in the top 12 after all said is done.
Well, I mean, like right now you've got Reichel, Kuhlman, and Lowry in the top 6. Those spots basically disappear when Ehlers, Perfetti, and Wheeler come back. Now, Adam Lowry's not going anywhere, but he presumably would move back to his normal third-line center role. You've got Morgan Barron there, who has been with him. I mean, I guess Mason Appleton's a little ways away, so we can, I guess, maybe take a moment on that. But we're going to find out who's next up after Harkins. I mean, there's Esamont, there's Reichel. They obviously really love Carson Kuhlman, who has been a guy apparently they had eyes on for a long time, and he's come in and almost played exclusively in the top 6. And I think, the way type of a player he is, he probably is more suited for third or fourth line duty, and we'll probably get a chance to see that at some point. But it really is going to be fascinating, even in the short term going into Friday when those guys are activated, the corresponding moves that have to be made. But from my perspective, I mean, Reichel was one of the last guys called up. I think he's probably there. Esamont's there. And then we'll find out who's next because, man, for my money right now, Kevin Stenlund is certainly one of the top 12 players, and he's done nothing to dispel that, I think, in the eyes of the coach, especially with what he's doing in the dot, as you mentioned.
Well, yeah, and I think he brings, what we all know what coaches love, right? We all know consistency is what they love. They love trust. And I think what you've seen in a small amount of time with Kevin Stenlund is an ability to build up a trust with a coach where we all know when players come into this lineup, whether they've been with the Moose, whether they've been in the press box for, a few games or a couple of weeks or whatever it may be, what Rick Bowness does is he sits them down and he talks to them and says, look, we're giving you an opportunity here. You deserve this. We'll go through some of the growing pains of you being back in the lineup or joining the lineup for the first time. But don't make the same mistake. And I think what we've seen with Kevin Stenlund is that taking that opportunity, being consistent in his play, and bringing an added element, right? Whether that's a physical element, whether that's being able to score, whether that's his contributions on the penalty kill. I mean, this is a guy who is answering everything that Rick Bowness has asked him to do. And so if Rick Bowness is going to stay with his word, he can't pull a guy off, who is doing everything that he's being asked of. I mean, if you heard Rick Bowness's comments, as you mentioned, or as you aired them not long ago, there was issues with Jansen Harkin's lack of consistency on the defensive side of the game, and that's going to eventually, if that continues game in and game out, you're going to find yourself out of the lineup and then eventually on waivers. And so, if you're a guy like Kevin Stenlund, you got to be happy with what you're doing because you're doing everything that Rick Bowness has asked you of since you joined the lineup.
Let's get to the blue line for a minute. The game against Vancouver, I want to say, I thought was Ville Heinola's best game. He continues to, as he plays more and I think feels more comfortable and plays regularly, we see the best of him. That being said, we saw Dylan Steinberg make a real bad gaffe early on in that game and then come back and, play solidly the rest of the way and rebound to the opportunities that Bowness continued to give him. Brendan Dillon isn't going anywhere. I know some people have been down on Neil Pionk, but I mean, I still think that he's certainly there. Is this one more chance for Ville Heinola to show what he can do tonight before Nate Schmidt comes back and inevitably bounces him? Or has he done enough, do you think, to maybe change the depth chart, if you will, or at least stick around?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I feel like, if you go by Rick Bowness's words about, it's about not making the same mistake twice, right? How important that is. Well, yeah, you hear that from a lot of coaches. And, I found interesting about Dylan Steinberg is that everyone's talking about that, those final moments of that game and, stepping in front of the puck and putting his body in the line of fire. Well, it wasn't that long ago, a game ago, 2 games before that, where Dylan Sandberg might have been the worst player on the team. Like, I mean, there was a couple, I think he had 3 giveaways in the previous 2 games, 2 of which led to breakaways that if Connor Hellebuck didn't stop them, I mean, maybe we're not having the same kind of conversation. So that's not to beat up on Dylan Sandberg. I think Dylan Sandberg has certainly, pulled his weight this season, and you're going to have those errors for being that young in this league and not inexperienced in the NHL. And that's going to happen. But it does show, I think, an ability to I don't want to say longer leash, but an ability to turn things around quicker than maybe we've seen under previous leadership. And in the sense that I think Ville Heinola has played well. I mean, I think he hasn't been terrific per se, but I think he brings an element to this team that is missing, a puck movement, especially with some of the players that have been out of the lineup, like a Nate Schmidt. But we'll see. I mean, whatever it is with him, I think it's hard to pinpoint what exactly Ville Heinola needs to do beyond maybe hit the score sheet every game with minimal ice time, if you will. But I do think that he should be a guy that sticks around, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Interesting matchup tonight with the Calgary Flames, and we're going to hear from Pat Steinberg and sort of get the latest on the Flames and really talk about that entire season that they have had. Because, of course, I mean, the offseason was an all-timer. I mean, I think we could go back 10, 20 years, and the amount of things that they dealt with, it was just so unusual. But it's been fascinating to watch this team play. I'll tell you what, Jeff, this is going to be a great test for the Winnipeg Jets. And, you start off this series at home with Calgary, then Tampa, and then Vancouver again. The one thing Calgary has been as of late has been shot monsters. They've been dominating 5-on-5 play. This is going to be a heck of a matchup tonight for the Winnipeg Jets. But I imagine just with our conversations that we've just had, there is going to be a ton of, many players on the fringes of the roster right now that are going to be looking to have their best game yet to remind Rick Bowness, or maybe make those decisions that much harder when it comes down to who's going to the Manitoba Moose.
Well, I think that's the beauty in all this, right? I mean, we were talking for weeks upon weeks about how's this team going to survive with all these injuries? How's this team going to, it's only a matter of time before the wheels fall off with another injury. All of a sudden, Cole Perfetti's out, and you're like, is this just a sick joke here, or what's happening? But that's the beauty of getting healthy. I mean, even if you look at a team like the Boston Bruins, right? When the Jets went up 2-0 on them, end up losing that game 3-2, that's a team that was fully healthy. And you look at it and you're like, wow, this team is fighting for, when I say wow, I mean the Winnipeg Jets, despite the loss, this is a team that's fighting for players individually are fighting for spots on this collective team. And if you look at who's coming back now, I think this is going to bring out the best in everybody. And the fact that you've had players playing up and down the lineup, you're going to have Nikolai Ehlers back in the mix. You're going to have guys that are going to come in automatically and get their opportunities. But I think you're going to have some tougher decisions to make on other players who haven't been in the lineup very long and that have been out of the lineup for long enough that, like Rick Bowness said in his after the morning skate today, you can't just expect guys to be off for that long and just come into the lineup and play as if they've been playing for the last 30 plus games. So I still think that certainly tonight's going to be a bit of a tryout period for those guys who find themselves on the bubble. But I think you're going to have the next week or so here, because I don't know as much as I think you're going to see some of those guys back in action. I don't think Rick Bowness is going to be comfortable putting everybody in right away. So I think there is going to be opportunity there, but we'll see. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I mean, when you're able to do more than just tread water with injuries, it creates a healthy competition, and you're going to see the fruits of that, as guys return to the lineup here in the next week or so.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I mean, at the beginning of the season, or the first few weeks of the season, who thought that we'd be talking about tough decisions involving Mikey Eyssimont, Kevin Stenlund? Most people didn't even know who Carson Kuhlman was at that point. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle that. But the bottom line is, it's nice to have some of those tough decisions in this respect, as opposed to the tough decisions as to who the heck is going to round out a full roster to play for the Winnipeg Jets so far this season. Just a quick aside, and this is not really a Jets question, but more an NHL. Just noticed while we've been doing the game that Jacob Vrana has been put on waivers by the Detroit Red Wings. Now, I mean, he's trying to work his way back after spending time in the NHL, NHLPA player assistance program. And we remember the trade, it was a year or two ago that, Detroit gave up plenty to the Washington Capitals to get this young player. And he signed it $5.25 million next season. It'll be interesting to see how many teams jump on, or at least put a claim in on Vrana, because it's quite obvious there's maybe more to meets the eye of this situation, Jeff, but very rarely do you get a player that is that talented available on waivers right now. And also, I will say, very rarely do you have a guy like Steve Yzerman walk away from a player like that. There could be more to it.
Yeah, and I think that's why you have people in your respective organization that do their homework on it, right? I mean, that's hockey's a small world. Obviously, as you mentioned, there was the inclusion of the league substance program, and I mean, you'd like to think that that's not a reason why you would cut loose on somebody. Usually, you'd support those people through those things. So, but you don't know what it's at play. But you do know that this is a guy who has had some, has played some good hockey over his career. It started in years ago, really in 2016, 2017. And has been with, started with Washington, moved over to Detroit, as you mentioned, in a deal over there, and has played not necessarily, great hockey, obviously with some of his own personal issues here, but has been able to find the back of the net. Is not quite a point per game player over the last few years. He's been tough to get in and out of the lineup the last couple of seasons.
That's the crazy thing when you look at, he's hardly played for Detroit.
Well,
in 2021 after the trade, he had 8 goals and 3 assists in 11 games, so was a point-a-game guy. But last year was productive when he was in. He scored in half his games. He had 13 goals and 19 points in 26 games. And then 2 games this year, a goal and an assist. He's been productive when he's out there. But when we heard that they were going to go with the full 2 weeks with the Grand Rapids Griffins and now waivers, you wonder what that situation is and why Detroit, of all teams that needs talented young players, might be walking away on that. But this could be an opportunity for another team to jump at it. I would love to know, when situations like this arise, of how many teams put claims in on a player. We usually just find out who gets them, and that would be the lowest one on the standings right now. But I'll tell you what, Florida's low enough. Maybe Florida, they could use a talented young player. Maybe he won't fit there though.
Yeah, they could use a lot of things right now, probably over there. Maybe this, everything except for nice weather, essentially, the Panthers could use. But it's an interesting one. I agree with you. I always find it interesting. I always wonder how many teams put in for a respective player, because there's obviously, like this. I don't know if this falls necessarily into a hot commodity per se, or one that everyone's going to jump over, but there have been players in the past where you wonder, why wouldn't anybody put a claim in on these guys? And so, I don't know. It will be interesting. There's lots. It's funny because when I saw that news about Vrana, I was trying to think of like what I could remember about him in the last few years, and it wasn't until I started looking at his stats that I was like, yeah, ever since he got dealt to Detroit, things haven't exactly gone. Haven't gone horribly in the sense of points per game, but it's the game total that hasn't really been up there. So, this could be a lot of things. Maybe it's not one of those things where you're looking to trade a guy. Maybe there's a benefit to just, getting a better, getting maybe a clean slate somewhere else, an opportunity somewhere else. Could be salary stuff, could be salary cap implications, could be a lot of different things. Maybe they're hoping he clears and is able to kind of get some time down there. But I don't know. I could see him easily getting picked up, whether that's, a lot of guys could use a talented player like him, but we'll see where he ends up.
Well, the funny thing about it is, Jeff, like there's a lot of really crappy teams in the league that could probably use a player like that. But after what Connor Bedard's been doing at the World Juniors, I'm not sure that any of those teams are interested in improving their teams right now.
Well, if you're in the bottom and you're the ready for
You're not
it,
taking $5 million on the cap.
I wouldn't be bringing $5 million on your cap and trying to get better. No, for sure. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was glued to the Monday nighter last night, and obviously all that came with that and missed the Connor Bedard, pretty much spectacle there, which I thought was, I obviously saw the replays and it was super impressive.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that, these are the kind of generational talents we've seen in the past, right? Could he be the next kind of Connor McDavid, the next Sidney Crosby? I mean, this is an exciting player to watch. And yeah, if I'm with you, Haas. If I'm in the bottom of the NHL barrel there, I'm not claiming him. And just because I can, I'd be doing all I can to make sure I'm staying where I am. So at the end of the year, I'm team number 32. When the next big fish hits the waiver wire,
you get that big 18.5% chance. That's the funniest thing about it. I mean, you could be the worst team in the league, and you've got an 82.5% chance of not getting the player. And I think that's good because, I mean, I don't know what you do about it right now, and I think it's only going to get worse and more obvious as we get into the second half of the season because he is such a tantalizing player. And the thing is, this draft is not just about Connor Bedard. I mean, you got Fantilli, you've got Carlson. Zach Benson would have been probably a top 3 pick last year. I mean, he's going to maybe be 5 or 6 this year from the Winnipeg Ice. So there is a heck of a lot going on, and it's going to make for a very interesting back end of the season. But for Winnipeg fans, the good thing is we won't be stressing about the lottery odds. We can, in all likelihood, be talking about a team pushing for the playoffs after a great first half of the season. Busy week for the Jets. Flames tonight, Skills Comp tomorrow, Tampa Bay Lightning on Friday, and that could be the day when many of those guys return from the injury list. And then Sunday afternoon against the Vancouver Canucks. Just on that note last night, you mentioned the Monday nighter. I mean, we talked about it right off the bat. I mean, I don't want to say unprecedented because we have seen incidences like that happen in hockey, actually, on a few occasions. And certainly arena safety, medical source. I mean, that's all been improved. But I think everyone's just still rattled and, really, really worried about Hamlin and what's his condition is right now. It's just a horrible scene, Jeff.
Sickening. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's, my thought in that, I mean, you use the word, unprecedented. I think there are other examples you could point to, as you mentioned, hockey, where guys collapse off, cardiac arrest on the bench, and it's a very scary moment. But I can't remember, and you've watched it even more of the games, NFL games, than I have in the past. I can't recall seeing. I've seen a lot of football games, covering the CFL. I mean, it's the same.
Well, and a lot of bad injuries too. But it was so clear, and you were watching it last night. I mean, they would go. Joe Buck and Troy would sort of, give some information. I mean, I can't imagine how difficult being put in that position is at a time like that. They go to commercial, come back, go to commercial. But the shots, the wide shots, the silence in the stadium, and most importantly, the shots of the other players let you know that this was not a guy that blew out his knee. This was not a guy that, oh my God, he's got a season-ending injury. This was literally life and death in front of everyone's eyes.
Well, and that's what I was getting at. It was that more often than not, it's, whether you need to bring a cart out, whether you need to, gruesome injuries or tough, they happen all the time in football, right? They happen almost every week. But more often than not, you bring out the cart, the guy gets onto the cart after a brief delay in the game. You do have guys from both teams often praying, hoping for the best for each player. And the player usually gives a thumbs up, on his way out. And it's kind of like, let's get going now. I mean, last night was a completely different scene. And unprecedented in a lot of ways, for me personally, as far as watching a game, was that, all of a sudden you have an ambulance out there. You have an emergency situation where you have CPR that's happening, and that doesn't happen very often. You hear about, I think it was Joe Buck that said that they were pushing on that man's chest last night. You have players who are in tears. You have guys who are in shock. I mean, that was just a very scary moment. And I mean, we often hear about it. In football in particular, you hear it in interviews with players about how, they're willing to put their life on the line every week for their teammates, for their team. It's all kind of cliche stuff, but the reality is that is what happens every single week. And I think the scariest part in all of it is that when you look at the play, it's not this, what you would think is some kind of, head hunting shot or, play that where it's like, it kind of makes sense on why the injury might be bad or, and whatnot. This is a borderline wrap up play where a guy gets up and, makes the play, gets up, looks like he's grabbing at his helmet and then collapse backwards. And you can see the fear on the players' faces almost instantly after that. And so, I mean, I tweeted out a couple times last night. I mean, I don't know any way how they would have played that game. And this whole idea about, Joe Buck said it 4 times, on air about, guys are going to get 5 minutes to warm up and get back on there. And then you saw the 2 head coaches get together. And I mean, you don't go to these situations are, I wasn't surprised at all when the players retreated to the locker room because that's exactly what you do in these situations. Is a decision to play or not to play isn't made by 2 head coaches and what the immediate pulse of their teams are. These are decisions that are made by the league. This is now a league issue, right? This is an optics thing. This is a commissioner is involved in this. The NFLPA is involved in this. Hell, the NFLPA is involved in this if it's a delay in weather and the delay is too long. I mean, that we see that in the CFL all the time, where there's a delay in weather. The CFLPA is involved in whether they feel that these players should have to go back onto the field after such a lengthy delay. Well, to watch a fellow teammate or an opponent, collapse the way he did and to expect everyone to be at the right mind to play football. I mean, I'm not sure that the Buffalo Bills are going to be in the right mind over the next week or 2 here. So, and that's not knowing the result of what happened yesterday. And so, it's a sad reminder that this is, it's a dangerous game. It's a violent game. It's not limited to just football either. I mean, these kind of things happen in all different sports. And it's, I'm curious to see what the effect is going to be, amongst the football community, amongst players, and I'm just happy that they made the common sense decision last night too.
Yeah, listen, I mean, and I know there's a lot of people piling on, and there's a lot of people that love to take shots, and frankly, there's a lot of people, especially on social media, that are they take advantage of situations like this to try to get whatever their angle is. Some people dropping things about the vaccine. Some people, it's absurd. And a lot of people, I mean, I know Skip Bayless is just getting absolutely killed.
Torched.
Listen, I think a lot of those people are they've hated Skip for a long time. I mean, I read that, and I think a lot of people were thinking the exact same thing. I mean, the game is irrelevant right now. He literally said it in, and I can't believe I'm defending Skip Bayless, but, if you really read what he said, I mean, it was what exactly a lot of people are thinking. Like, the game is secondary right now, but oh my God, the impact of what is going to happen from this is significant. Now, I think we all agree that last night wasn't the time to talk about what happens, but it was an observation that, frankly, I think was really accurate. I mean, I certainly was thinking about that. I mean, so what are they going to do? I mean, the NFL is not stopping. The season's not over because of this that happened, and we hope that it'll end with a great result. But one way or the other, they will get back to business. And, I mean, that game, Jeff, was... I mean, the fact that it happened this wasn't week 3 between the Jags and Texans when you can easily, hey, you know what, whatever, we'll figure it out later on. We'll work a bye week around. I mean, the timing of this, the season ends in 6 days or in 5 days now. You've got the playoffs going on. And I mean, it really is unprecedented from a number of levels. And I mean, as the NFL said today, I mean, they're not really getting into that. The week 18 schedule is not going to be changed. But I have no idea how. And I mean, it really does affect the integrity of, I mean, if they just call this game a tie, the Kansas City Chiefs are the number 1 seed right now.
Right.
If the Bills win that game, I mean, there's all sorts of things. And then, everything on another side of things that really aren't tied into football, but tangentially, affect as well. The bottom line is this. I'm sure we'll figure out more of that. Hopefully it is in the shadow of hearing about incredible medical work that saved a young man's life, and some recovery going forward. So, I mean, I really hope that in the future days we'll be talking about and thanking the folks that acted so quickly and did what they could do. And I have seen some people that said it's a borderline miracle that he is in the situation that he's in right now. And that obviously is a good thing. But hey, just one more football one before we go. Some people in the chat is getting to the CFL quickly. Brandon Banks cut today or let go. Is that just Argos going younger after winning it? He wasn't really going to be in the plans going forward?
Well, look, I mean, to me, I think, and if you read some of the replies, I think this is setting him up to be retired as a Tiger Cat. I mean, this is a guy who
makes sense.
was very, very, very open about this, this past season possibly being or likely being his final year, right? I mean, and what better way for Brandon Banks to go out than a Grey Cup champion? I mean, he's not going to be remembered for the 2022 Grey Cup championship. I mean, he's going to be part of that team, but he's going to be remembered for all the special things he did with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So for me, this is probably just his decision to, and I don't know this to be sure. I mean, hell, the way that guy can fly off the handle, who knows? Maybe he lipped off Pinball and Pinball said, "Get out of here." You know what I mean? Obviously didn't happen, but I think this, if you're asking me, and you are, my guesstimation is this is just an early release to quickly sign a 1 day with Hamilton. Thank all his fans for what's been a spectacular career for the speedy receiver, and nothing more. I mean, I don't think he needed a head start on free agency and all the other things for reasons why you get an early release. This to me reeks of a pending retirement announcement as a Hamilton Tiger Cat.
Hammer, great stuff, man. Happy New Year. Glad to hear you're on the mend. Hopefully we can both be close to 100% next week when we do this. And enjoy the game tonight, which should be an interesting matchup between the Jets and Flames. And, of course, we've got a big one on Friday as the Tampa Bay Lightning come to town. And we may see the return of some pretty key members of the Jets that have been out for a while.
Yeah, right on, Huss. I wish health and happiness to everybody out there. Thanks for watching me push through this one. I certainly appreciate it, and shout out to all the viewers out there. You make the show. We'll have a great one.
Great stuff. There it is, Jeff K. Hamilton on Twitter, folks, and you can check out all of his fine work in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press. We did hit a little CFL there when we were talking Bombers on this program, and of course curling as well. We do it for Princess Auto, a proud Winnipeg company that of course is coast to coast, but headquartered right here, and a great sponsor of the Bombers, our top Manitoba curling teams, and your boys here at Winnipeg Sports Talk. Princess Auto is also where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Well, if you were cheersing friends on New Year's Eve, I hope you did it with the good stuff, our favorite Canadian whiskey, the legendary Canadian Club, available at your finest liquor stores. And of course, when we get back to IG Field in a few months for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, we'll be back there because they, of course, are the official sponsor of the Bombers in the official spirit of the blue and gold. And hey, if you are popping into a Manitoba Liquor Marts anytime soon, make a point of checking out that Jim Beam display and try and get one of the remaining Bomber collector glasses. Zach Caleros, Adam Bighill, Nick Dembski, available with a Jim Beam purchase at select Manitoba Liquor Marts. And hey, a huge thanks to our friends at Culligan Water. The new year is here. Many of us making New Year's resolutions. Maybe the best one and the easiest one to keep is to drink more water. And when you're drinking more water, the water experts are there for you for whatever you and your family need. Culligan Water, the experts in Winnipeg and Manitoba for over 65 years with water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, and citywide water delivery services, and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see the gang at Culligan at 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180 on the Horn, or check them out online at drinkculligan.com. All right, Jets, Flames tonight. And I always love when we're playing Calgary. I usually jump on with Pat and the guys on 960. I did quite a bit of work after TSN shut down, and then we got real busy here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. But it's also a great time to get the latest on the Flames and welcome in a great friend of the program, my guy, Pat Steinberg. Patty, Happy New Year, man. What's up?
Happy New Year, Huss. It's good to see you, man. Yeah, just chilling, looking ready and looking forward to this game. As Jets have been a good story all year. The Flames are finally playing the hockey they need to play as well. You got one team that's had a great year so far, and another team that has not necessarily lived up to expectations, but is starting to trend in the right direction. This should be a good one tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that we're into the new year, certainly here in Winnipeg, the eyes are all on the guys in the morning skate and who's going to actually come back to the lineup. I mean, the job that they did to survive December with the record that they did, considering how much hockey they were playing and the guys that were out of the lineup, was really admirable. But it doesn't look like those guys will be coming back tonight. And they take on a Flames team that, well, I mean, you tell us. I mean, it was such a wild offseason, so many big changes, but still some big-time players coming into the lineup. How long did it take for this team to really come together as a squad? And is this some of the best hockey you've seen them play so far this season coming into tonight?
Well, the answer on the first part is I'll tell you maybe in a month or two, because I don't think that they fully have to this point. They're definitely playing their best hockey of the year, though. To the other part, this is the best stretch that I think that we've seen them play all year, and that includes the 5-1 start they got off to, which was really cool, and it was a neat story to see them have the best 6-game start in franchise history, and it just. I think that was them playing a little bit over their skis, and that was maybe just a little bit of there was an adrenaline thing with some new faces in the start of a season, all that type of stuff. But what we've seen of late, and it started just before Christmas on a 4-game California road trip, started in San Jose, and they went 3-0-1 on that road trip. They come home and they split a little home road back-to-back where they should have beat the Oilers in the first half, but they don't. And then they go into Seattle and put up a really impressive game against the Kraken. They come home New Year's Eve and they beat Vancouver in impressive fashion as well. And so that's kind of been the 7-game stretch that has really been the best stretch of the season. They're 5-1-1 in that stretch. And what's been good about that is that they've been able to play a similar brand of hockey night in, night out. They look like the same team night in, night out. They've gotten good goaltending from both guys. And maybe the most important part, Huss, is that their best players are finally starting to all at the same time contribute at big times. Nazem Kadri has scored big goals. Jonathan Huberdeau is playing his best hockey since joining the Flames, and that is still a long process, and that's still something that is playing itself out. Elias Lindholm looks great. Their top pair of Hannafin and Anderson, they have been all over the score sheet. So you're seeing Andrew Mangiapane play probably his best hockey of the season after a slow start. So you're seeing the top players on this team, they're really contributing. And the guy I guess I would leave out is that I left out and unfairly so is Tyler Toffoli, who's maybe been their best forward or one of their 2 best forwards all year long. So they're getting this contribution, and it's all happening at the same time. Whereas earlier, early in the season, Huberdeau was struggling. Lindholm's numbers weren't there, but Kadri was going. And then all of a sudden, Lindholm started going, but Kadri dropped off. And whereas now everybody is kind of pulling in the same direction. So it's been good, and it's been a nice stretch, but they're still barely in a playoff spot, and they're still nowhere close to where they want to be, and that is in a Pacific Division playoff spot. So still lots of work to do.
We've spent so much time talking about the Bowness effect and the incredible job that Rick Bowness has done turning around what was a pretty dysfunctional team last year into a team that, is 10 games above 500, looking to get guys back and really poised for the second half of this season. Tell us about the year that Daryl Sutter has. What have been the biggest challenges with all of that player turnover, but knowing that the talent has been there, it really does seem like this has been a process from a coaching standpoint as well for the big guy.
Definitely has been, and he, I think, has had more struggle in getting his group to where he wants it than he did at any point last year. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think the number one thing that we've seen, Huss, is that they haven't, to this point, and I think maybe it's starting to figure itself out, but to this point, they haven't found a spot for Jonathan Huberdeau. And that has been maybe the number one growing pain thing that we have seen from this team. Huberdeau has played with 3 different centers this year. He started with Elias Lindholm, then went to Nazem Kadri, then moved to Michael Backlund, back to Lindholm, and over the last little bit, he's been back with Nazem Kadri, and it seems like maybe they're starting to build something there. So that's good news, and maybe they found somewhat of a long-term permanent fit as to where Huberdeau's playing. So that's good, but that's been a challenge. And I also think it's been a challenge just for both Huberdeau and Darryl to kind of get on the same page. And, there was that comment made after one of the games earlier in the year that made some headlines. And I know that didn't sit well with Jonathan and his camp, and they seem to have worked past that. And I just think that different coaching style than Jonathan's ever had. This is a brand new player for Darryl that comes in with a very established way of playing. So I think there's been some growing pains in those two guys getting on the same page. And that's not to suggest they won't or there's a rift. I just think that there's some growing pains in 2 new personalities. So I think that's been a challenge for the coach. And at the same time, I think it's been a challenge for him in trying to figure out solid, steady line combinations. And that was, again, not a big issue last year because they found lightning in a bottle on night 1 when Elias Lindholm, Johnny Gaudreau, and Matthew Tkachuk were put together. They played all but, I think, 2 periods together last season. And that was right from day 1. Well, they've had nothing close to a steady line like that at all this year. And so last year, there was some juggling in the bottom 9, but you always knew that Lindholm line was going to drive the bus, and they haven't had that. So it's been a real kind of jigsaw puzzle trying to figure out who's playing with who and what forward groups work best with one another. And then the last thing that I think has been a bit of an issue is last year, from about game 5 or 6 on, they had about as set in stone baseball lineup type of situation when it comes to their blue line as any team had in the league. They had 3 pairings that they could roll out every single night. They stayed healthy, and you just knew that all 3 of those pairings were going to play a lot of minutes at 5-on-5, and you didn't really have to worry too much about who they were out there against or what type of situations they were in. Well, this year, with Eric Branson gone, Mackenzie Weegar in from Florida, still also himself trying to figure out a brand new team, and no Oliver Shillington, and he hasn't been with the team all year long. They've had a lot of trouble, plus more injuries than they had at any point last year on defense. They've had a really difficult time finding 3 set solid pairings every single night. The Anderson-Hanifin pairing's been together all year. Everything else has been a little bit of a puzzle as well, with a lot of rotation. So there definitely have been some issues, and there's also a lot of expectations on this team, Huss. They came into this season with a lot of spotlight, a lot of people picking them to win the division, a lot of people picking them to go deep in the playoffs, and a lot of people saying that they were better than they were last year with all the moves that Brad Treliving made in the offseason. And I think that I don't even think that it's like an external expectations thing. I just think that everybody inside that room felt like, hey, we got a good team. And to this point, I think that they have struggled dealing with those expectations. And I think Darryl is trying to figure out how to get the group to manage those expectations a little bit more effectively.
It's hilarious, Pat. I mean, we spent so much time talking about how the Jets were going to get blown up and all the players that were going to get traded and what had happened. And essentially all they did was hire Rick Bowness. He came in and turned this thing around. And it's very similar to what happened in Calgary the year before. All that being said, the offseason, I just have to ask you about your perspective of the Flames offseason, because you knew it was going to be rough. But from the second that Gaudreau walked out the door, I mean, it was maybe the most momentous and interesting offseason for any NHL team I can remember in forever. And Brad Treliving was at the start of it. I mean, how do you, when you look back on that offseason and how the Flames team has changed from then until now, what stands out to you?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that Rick Bowness is like one of my absolute favorites. Now, after that 2 playoff series the Flames had with Dallas with him as the head coach, and then last year going 7 games and just getting to interact with him, it was awesome. So I was really happy when he landed on his feet in Winnipeg. It's awesome to see the success that he's having. It was, I keep calling it a once in a lifetime off season or a once in a lifetime summer. It's like if you're a sports radio guy or if you're a Flames fan, like don't ever expect to see anything like that again. No. Because you're right. It was every 2 or 3 weeks, not just a piece of news, because every year there's news, right? So they've re-signed this guy or they've brought in, fourth line player X, or they've brought in third pairing defenseman Y. And there's always news throughout an off season. But when you think of, first of all, they go from winning that series against Dallas to a 5-game exit in round 2 against Edmonton. And there was a lot of frustration, but still, I think, palpable excitement about, how fun that season was for Calgary. And then you go from the 5-game exit against Edmonton into, okay, what's Johnny Gaudreau's contract going to look like? What's Matthew Tkachuk's contract going to look like? Are they going to get identical deals here? Are they both going to sign for 8? And that was the big topic. And then we talked to them on the final day, the final media day, and specifically Matthew, and not to say Johnny wasn't. Johnny hedged a little bit more, but definitely was very adamant that he'd like to be back. But Matthew Tkachuk went out of his way to say that, no, all I want to do is sign a long-term contract here. And then nothing. There was nothing. We heard about initial offers, and we heard that, things were on the table, but there was nothing. I remember being at the draft in Montreal and talking to Brad Treliving in the team hotel lobby. And there had been a lot of reporting from guys like Pierre LeBrun and Frank Saravalli and just a lot about, oh man, like Matthew Tkachuk might be on the table, and they're starting to quietly field offers. And so I remember Brad wanted to sit down and have a conversation just so that we could get some information out there that, nope, they're not trading Matthew Tkachuk at the draft, and nope, they're still very much wanting, and the number one priority is to sign both guys. So we go from that, nothing gets done at the draft. We come back, and I remember July 12th. It'll be one of the more memorable days I've ever had doing this. So July 12th was the day before free agency started. And so I get up that day and just check in with a couple of people, and like, this Johnny Gaudreau thing, it's moving. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, for the first time, like it's deadline time, like we're starting to see some movement. So as that day went along on July 12th, they were hammering out a contract, and Louis Gross's representative and Brad Treliving and the team, like they were grinding at a deal all day. And it was hours and hours of calling back and checking in. And as the day went along, they moved closer to the final deal, which just happened to be what Jonathan Huberdeau ended up getting after the trade. They had hashed out and gotten to the point, 8 years, $10.5 million, salary structure, signing bonus, all that type of stuff they'd figured out. And the Flames believed that they had a deal. And they hung up, and they thought that they had something done, and they were just waiting for the final sign off and let's get the paperwork filed. And then they got a call back however long later, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, don't know the exact time frame, but then they got the phone call, said Johnny's going in a different direction. And Johnny decided to go to free agency. And so that kicked off. So I remember, and I'll never forget it, because I got a couple of reports that, Patty, this thing is close. Like, I think we're done. So I just put something out there on Twitter. I want to say it was about like 5:30 p.m. or something like that, around that time, Calgary time. And I just put something out there. Hey, as we've been talking about all day on Flames Talk, there's been a lot of movement, a lot of optimism that this thing might get done. And literally like 15 minutes later, maybe less than that, Elliot Friedman comes up. Johnny's going to free agency. I'm like, you got to be friggin' kidding me. Like, I just put that out, and 15 minutes later, but that's because of how crazy it was, because it was that It was that touch and go. And I think that's what it's hard for me to buy into this theory that, Johnny Gaudreau calculated this and he screwed over the Flames and he planned this and he got revenge on the Flames. No, he was ready to re-sign with them. They had a deal and then it was a last minute swerve. And so that kicked off just the craziest few weeks, because the next day the Flames don't really do anything on July 13th. But then that evening we're like, okay, well, so Johnny going to Philly, New Jersey, and then all of a sudden Johnny Gaudreau's going to Columbus, and you're like, well, excuse me, he's going
for way less money and less term.
Way less money. And I think that they overplayed their free agency hand. In fact, I know they overplayed their free agency hand, and they had already decided they're not coming back to Calgary, and so Columbus was the offer they decided to take. And so you're like, okay, well, Johnny's in Columbus. Now what? Nazem Kadri was still out there, and they had been engaged with Nazem from day one of free agency, but nothing doing there. And so that was like, I think that was a Wednesday. And then that following weekend on a Sunday, Craig Oster, the agent for Matthew Tkachuk, calls Brad Treliving and says, hey, also, just hope you're having a good summer. Our guy's not signing either. So you want to give him his qualifier? Sure. But then he's leaving an unrestricted free agency. You might want to think about a trade. And so that was a Sunday. And that we knew about that, like, a couple of us had gotten wind, and so we were like, kind of, without coming right out and saying it, we were kind of saying, yeah, be prepared for a Matthew Tkachuk trade in the next few weeks. I don't think we were necessarily prepared for it to happen less than a week later, because then that Friday night Matthew Tkachuk gets traded. We find out what the return was. I remember Sarah Valley put it out there on a Friday night, and I texted a couple people. They said release within seconds, but it's going to blow your mind what we got back, or what they got back. And it did. You're like, goodness gracious, they turned Matthew Tkachuk into what, 4 different assets? And then the season, and then from there on out, it's like, okay, well, a few weeks later, Jonathan Huberdeau. I was in Paris, France on vacation. Jonathan Huberdeau signs his 8 times 10.5. You're like, okay, that's a pretty big
the fact that they just gave him the Johnny deal too. By the way, we've got this thing ready. We'll just cross his name. I'll put yours on, and to get him to do that. I mean, you got Weegar and Huberdeau signed long-term before even playing a game with Calgary. I mean, it was truly, when we look back at general managers making chicken salad out of chicken, you-know-what, Brad Treliving might be at number 1. And that is sort of, I think, in a lot of ways, though, maybe created a little bit of angst in the early part of the season when things weren't just going so smoothly for the Flames. But the bottom line is, I mean, teams in these Canadian markets, and Winnipeg would be one. The Jets are going to be in similar situations next summer, having to make big-time decisions on players with 1 year left of team control. You can't get left holding the bag. And, I mean, I still can't believe the job that Treliving did. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if we're seeing those players making big impacts in the playoffs. Listen, we talked tons about Huberdeau, but just before we go, tell us about Weegar's season. Because he's a guy that was off a lot of people's radars playing down in South Florida.
It's actually been pretty similar to Huberdeau's, just in the fact that it's taken time and it's been kind of a slow burn. And it was, Huberdeau did not start well, and it's just kind of been gradually better for him. Weegar actually came in and looked like he was very noticeable from the get-go, and then it kind of tailed off a little bit. Same with Kadri, to be honest with you. But I think Weegar's game is really trending. And the problem, the biggest issue that Mackenzie has had is that he has kind of been moved all over the place. So they've had Hanif and Anderson together as their top pairing all year, but Chris Tanev, who was healthy all regular season long last year until the playoffs, he's already missed 2 separate stretches of games. So that's moved. So when Tanev has been healthy, for the most part, Weegar's been playing his weak side on the left of Tanev. So you've had 2 right shots, and that's taken some time because Tanev has not played with a guy on his offside, kind of playing his offhand in a long time. So that's been an adjustment for Chris. So Chris and Mackenzie have had some growing pains playing together. Then Tanev's been hurt. When Tanev's been hurt, they've moved Weegar back to his strong side, and he's played with Nikita Zadorov on his left, and that's been good. And they've had good chemistry together. So it's been I think that's been part of why it's been more of a slow process for Mackenzie, is that there just has not been a lot of continuity in terms of who he's played with. But over the last little bit, since Tanev's come back, the most recent time, that pairing has been really strong. Uyghur's game is getting noticeably more impactful in terms of how he's affecting it offensively and the way he's jumping in and all that type of stuff. He scored his first goal on New Year's Eve of the season's first goal as a Flame when the Flames beat the Canucks, and he looks like a more confident guy. He looks like a guy who's starting to feel more at home with the way this team wants him to play, the responsibilities that Darryl puts on his defensemen, all that type of stuff. And it's not like he hasn't played his off wing before. He did it most of last year with Ekblad as well. But I think that doing it with Chris and getting used to a new pairing with Tanev has been an adjustment, but is really starting to rectify itself. So for him, I think the second half of the season is going to be one where Flames fans are talking about, holy, now we're seeing what Mackenzie Uyghur's all about. Now we're seeing why everybody was so excited about this blue line coming into the year.
Well, I'm looking forward to this game tonight. I know we spent a lot of time talking about the forwards. Josh Morrissey's been making all the headlines, of course, a Calgary native. And we've mentioned that he might have one of the best contracts in the league at just over $6 million. Tell you what, Rasmus Anderson's in a very similar spot as that. I'm just looking 4.5. And remember when he signed that deal, and we spent a lot of time talking about him for certainly bang for your buck. And a lot of fans like to talk about value. We've got two of the best. And then, of course, Connor Hellebuck. Just on the way out, though, I mean, we talked about the defense. We know Connor Hellebuck and what he's doing this year. What's up with the Flames goaltending? Has it been an issue this year?
It has been, but it's getting better. And I think the biggest issue has been Jacob Markstrom's first quarter. It sunk his numbers and has made it so it's been a bit of an uphill climb for his save percentage to bounce back. He had, by his own admission and certainly by those who watched out here, he had a rough first quarter of the season. He was letting in soft goals almost on a nightly basis during his starts, and you're like, you're not used to seeing that with Jacob, and it just or goals that weren't necessarily soft, but you're like, yeah, you needed a save there. Third period, you definitely needed a save from, and I think that you went through this last year in your market with Connor. You're like, he was not the same guy for most of last year that he has been for his tenure in the NHL. And so you're like, geez, okay, you think he's going to figure it out, but when? And he had a game against Montreal where, I don't know if you saw the video where he was out like in the slot making a baseball slide save. You're like, what are you doing? It was an easy goal for Slavkovsky. They ended up losing that game. And after that game, he talked to the media and said a few times, like, yeah, I suck at hockey right now, to paraphrase. He said that a few times. And that was kind of a clue to the Flames, like, okay, we need to dial back on this guy for a second. We need to give him a reset. And Dan Vladar started 6 of the next 8 games after that. And that gave Jacob the reset he needed. And since that time, I think he was already starting to turn the corner, but since that time, he's turned the corner, I think, significantly. And he's looked more like the bona fide number one guy. So now that we're into the second, almost done the second quarter of the season, I think Vladar has been great for him all year. And now Markstrom looks a whole lot more like the guy they need him to be. So the second half, third and fourth quarters of the year, I think for the first time all year, they're going to be able to truly run their goaltending plan the way they want. And they're not necessarily going to have to twist themselves in knots to make sure they're making the right goaltender call.
Patty, great stuff as always. I know we could get into Connor Bedard, but luckily I don't think either of the teams that we're going to see tonight are going to be in the nuclear tankathon that's about to come going forward. So we'll stick to tonight's game. Great catching up, man. Happy New Year. Keep up the great work out there on 960, and let's do this again soon in 2023.
Absolutely, Huss. Great to see you, buddy.
Great stuff with my guy, Pat Steinberg. Had a lot of fun doing shows with him on 960 in Calgary, and definitely one of the hardest working dudes in the business. Looking forward to this game tonight. We'll get Remo back in here. We'll get to some of the lines for tonight's game, some interesting matchups in the National Hockey League. First up, though, a big Happy New Year to our friends at Boston Pizza. If you're not heading to the game tonight, the next best place to watch it, It's getting together with the gang, enjoying some ice cold schooners and delicious Boston wings at your nearest Boston Pizza. Make sure to check out the new menu as well, which includes my personal favorite, the jalapeno popper dip, the mac and cheeseburger, excellent, and the carbonara pizza as well. If you can't make it out to BP, you can always order online and check out their game day deals online at bostonpizza.com. A big cheers of the new year to our friends at Little Brown Jug. And they had a big New Year's bash at the brewery and tap room and are now all into 2023. If you're looking for a great spot to gather with friends, to drink some of Winnipeg's favorite local beer, Little Brown Jug in the Exchange on William Avenue is the spot. Of course, you can also order for home delivery at littlebrownjug.ca or pick up 1919 and all the great Little Brown Jug offerings at your local beer store, wherever you get the good stuff. And hey, a big Happy New Year as well to Nick and Nikki DQ. Great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk since before we even did show number 1. To think we're just about moving into year number 3 in a couple months. Can't thank them enough. Hey, there's always time for a blizzard. 4 locations: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's. And hey, if you do want to order a cake, you can do it. Order online on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. Remo, let's get back in here. Lots going on in chat today. We seem to be debating whether the Jets need a goon.
Yeah, I see people saying that in chat. I'm not here for that discussion. You need talented players. This isn't, 1980s hockey, early 90s hockey. I mean, you can bring in a guy who plays physical, who plays tough, but a guy who's just strictly there to drop the gloves. I think there's better uses of a roster spot. But I will say I am enjoying the conversation that's happening in the chat, and I love chiming in as well at times. So there you go.
Yeah, well, I'll say this much. I know a lot of that conversation revolved around Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson isn't going anywhere, but there are 31 other teams that would kill to get him on their squad if they could. That being said, it'll be very interesting to talk about the Jets roster, see the way they look when they get a little healthier. And then, of course, what Kevin Cheveldayoff has up his sleeve heading into the deadline. Let's get to the Coolbet lines for today. And Remo, Jets a home dog tonight, plus 118 at home against the Calgary Flames.
Really? That's surprising to me, Hustler. I'm looking at Money Puck. I was looking at moneypuck.com. They have like percentages on probabilities. And I think if you are making any wagers, it just helps, comparing maybe their projections with what Vegas says. They have this as a coin flip. Jets 50.3%, Calgary 49.7%. So maybe there is some value. I always think there's value on home dogs anyways, but maybe there is some value here on the Jets. Although if they play the way they did Sunday, I don't think that's a recipe for long-term success. But they do have Connor Hellebuyck in goal, and what we learned, I didn't mention us, what we learned on Saturday's game, 2 Connors is better than 1 Connor. And I saw that online. And I think we can all agree Connor Hellebuyck is better than McDavid. That's what I learned on Saturday.
Hey, well, Connor got the dub, along with Kyle Connor getting the winning goal. So, no, it was a great way to finish the year. And now another Alberta team as the Jets' opponent tonight. Other games in the league, Panthers, the struggling Florida Panthers, maybe just what the doctor ordered. The Coyotes coming to town. Panthers are minus 327. The Canes have won 11 in a row and 15 of 16. They're in New York to take on the Rangers. Canes minus 125. Sens minus 213 at home against Columbus. Toronto a big favorite against the Blues. Caps minus 154 at home against the Buffalo Sabres. Sabres plus 131. They had their 6-game winning streak snapped. Other games tonight. Excuse me, Nashville minus 239 against the Habs. And Lightning, big favorites on the road against the Blackhawks. We do have a little lock shop partner parlay for tonight. Toronto, Winnipeg, and Edmonton all to win. Juiced up to plus 450. Jets are the one underdog there. Edmonton has the Kraken. The Leafs have the St. Louis Blues. And I got a pretty nice number there. We'll see if we can put it together, and you can jump on that in the Coolbet exclusives. And Rio, just before we go, I know tomorrow will be a fun day. We'll recap the game tonight, get ready for the Jets skills competition. Just for folks that maybe popped in a little later on, we talked about the very scary incident last night in the Monday Nighter right off the top of the show. No changes to the schedule. Still not sure what becomes of last night's game. That'll be determined at a later date. But the schedule as of right now will not be changed. That game will not be made up this week. And the Week 18, final week of the season schedule is set right now for the National Football League. And we wait to see how this is all going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of implications for playoff scheduling and, just on a strictly like business standpoint. I'm not sure what they're going to do. Do they go with a tie and give it to the Chiefs? I think that would be the easiest thing to do. I think it's real tough to, fit this game in. Again, we're all monitoring the health of Damar Hamlin, and what's going to happen, with the league going forward. But they're just moving ahead to Week 18, and you play who you play next week.
Yeah, and one more thing that we should get out, and this is a really sad note. Jets 1.0 fans will remember this individual. Former Winnipeg Jet defenseman and first-round pick Sergei Boughton passed away on New Year's Eve. And Boughton has a special place in Jets history. He was one of the more infamous first-rounders in Jets history when he was selected by Mike Smith as a 25-year-old. Let's just say he didn't pan out as management would have wanted to. He was described as the Jack Tatum of Russian hockey at the time, and did come here and played a few more years in the National Hockey League, never really panning out. But I'll tell you what, I'm sure he was the last 25-year-old picked in the first round. I'm not sure that'll ever happen again, but should just mention that the passing of a former Winnipeg Jet this weekend.
Yeah, I saw the Jets tweeting that out yesterday. That's way too young, Huss. I know it brought back a lot of memories of his time here from people in the chat as well and in the comments. So nice of the Jets to send that one out.
No doubt about it. All right, I'm going to get some cold effects in me and try and make it through the rest of this day and into the game. And we'll get back at it tomorrow with the latest on the Jets coming out of tonight's game against the Calgary Flames. As you mentioned, skills competition tomorrow. Should be fun. Jesse Pollock, actually, from TSN's coming in. He's going to be taking part, I believe, a head-to-head race against Jet, are the rumors.
Really?
So, absolutely. We'll hopefully see if we can maybe hook up with Jesse tomorrow on the program.
I actually messaged him on Facebook. Jesse's got a pretty bit tough schedule tomorrow. I don't know how he's going to perform. He's at the Halifax of the World Juniors, has to go to Toronto to get his hockey equipment, and then come to Winnipeg for the thing. So I'm like, Jess, you got any time for us? He's like, man, I'm pretty slammed. So he's been doing some great content at the World Juniors, showing off everyone's dressing rooms and stuff. We'll get him on in the future. I had him on end of December when you were away. It was just me, and we had a great conversation. So he'll be back. The Jets are playing well. That's number one Jet supporter, bar downs Jesse Pollock, and he will be at the skills competition. Maybe we'll get our predictions in, Hustler.
Yeah, well, as I said, we certainly will do that tomorrow, and we'll get your predictions as well on all the contents and of the skills comp. Anyways, maybe we'll get Jesse after the fact. But yes, I can tell you that the plan right now, I guess as long as he can get here in time, is to have Jesse take on Jet in the speed of light, which I've missed this year, to be honest, at intermissions.
Yeah, we'll have hopefully the planes work out because they haven't exactly been reliable. And I always like when they have the trophy about there's actually a trophy involved in the skills competition. So I think there's going to be some bragging rights on the line there, and we'll see what the teams are and who's in what competition. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But tonight, we do have a very busy schedule of hockey. I know we're all looking forward to the Jets game as well as some other games like, I don't know, Panthers, Coyotes. We got our eye on here too.
Panthers, Coyotes, believe me. I'll go straight to the post game if the visitors win. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. A lot of games on. A lot of games. I'm intrigued. Edmonton, Seattle, Vancouver. A lot going on in Vancouver. You see JT Miller, his comments earlier this week.
Man, that guy just needs to take a time out in front of the microphones. Yeah, his lower point production is because he's not cheating the game and he's playing it the right way. Sure, that went over very well amongst the psycho Canucks fan base.
Yeah, it did not. Yeah, did not go over well. Did not go over well. He's not liked there, JT Miller right now. So, oh well.
No doubt. Hey, folks, don't forget, a week yesterday, I guess, coming up January 9th is the Bison game against the Ukrainian team that's coming to town, Canada Life Center. Make sure to join us over the next couple days. We will have some ways that you can win tickets to that game. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to Chris Peters, Pat Steinberg, and Jeff Hamilton. Thanks to all of our sponsors and most of all of you for being a part of us today. If you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button. Make sure you're subscribed. And New Year's resolution, do us a favor. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk, how they can find us, how they can subscribe to the channel, and hopefully they can join us daily right here on YouTube at 1 o'clock p.m. And shout out to everyone listening afterwards on the podcast. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll be back at 1 tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.